Welcome to Keeping It Green, a podcast for ornamental plant professionals and enthusiasts with hosts Margaret Pickoff and Sandy Feather.
Hello, and welcome to Keeping It Green, a podcast from Penn State Extension for ornamental plant professionals and enthusiasts. I'm one of your hosts, Margaret Pickoff. I'm a horticulture educator with Penn State Extension, and on each episode, I'm joined by my colleagues on the green industry team as co-hosts. On today's episode, my co-host is Sandy Feather. Hi, Sandy.
Hey, Margaret.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, on today's episode, we're going to be joined by Jeff Jabco from Swarthmore's Scott Arboretum. But before we get to our interview with Jeff, we like to start our conversations just chatting about what we are seeing and experiencing and doing in our work as Penn State Extension educators and just plant people. So Sandy, what are you? You're out in Allegheny County in Western Pennsylvania. What are
Right?
you seeing or doing or experiencing right now?
Rain. Thank God.
Yay!
Yeah, I hadn't checked my rain gauge today, but I had an inch and a half before yesterday. So I think we probably got about 2.5 inches out of this rain, and God knows we needed it. It was really stuff still looks pitiful. I think the trees can't wait to shed their leaves and be done with it for the year. How about in your area?
Yes, same. My sister lives in the Pittsburgh area, and she's always able to tell me what weather to expect in the next day or so. And so she's like, "There's rain coming." So finally, I mean, we did get a few kind of like little sprinkles or short little bursts. And I was kind of like, "Oh man, we really need like a nice like soaking rain." And so far we have gotten a couple, I think, good rains. It's not nearly enough, like you said,
Right.
but everything out in the garden perked up that I've been neglecting watering for a couple of weeks.
Well, it's hard and it gets expensive. I was telling Tim and Jeff that I went to visit. There's a historic mansion here. It's called Elm Court, and it's up in Butler, Pennsylvania. And I worked there like 30 years ago as an estate gardener. And fast forward to now when the wealthy owners passed away, and they're scraping, counting their pennies, and they weren't able to irrigate stuff. So it was astonishing to see how bad everything looked there.
Yeah. I mean, it is a lot of labor to keep things watered, and I mean, I know the people who are growing crops are feeling it
That's a whole
too.
right. Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
just makes everything a lot harder. So I know folks have been really grateful for the rain. And then, we'll see because we've had a couple of pretty intense long drought periods in the
Hmm.
last couple of years. And we've definitely been able to see this season the effect of last summer and
Hmm.
fall being bone dry, and entire landscapes really shifting, like
Hmm.
established trees, plants that have been there for a long time really starting to struggle. And so people are noticing, not just our clients in the landscape
Right.
industry, but also homeowners are
Right. Their
wondering,
their customers are
yeah,
noticing. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
It's well, I think there's going to have to be a lot of care as we're selecting new, particularly trees and shrubs, those long-term plants in the landscape. I think we're going to have to revisit our plant palettes if this is going to be our weather from now on.
yeah, well, that's something I'm looking forward to asking Jeff his opinion on. So let's bring on our guest today. Jeff Jabco is the executive director of Scott Arboretum and Gardens here in Southeast Pennsylvania. Welcome, Jeff. Thanks for being on our podcast.
Oh, thanks, Margaret. I'm glad to be here.
So we always start out by just asking our guests to describe what their role is at their organization or workplace. What does your role entail as executive director?
Well, I am in charge of our whole recently unified departments. I've been here for 35 years, and for up until this past summer, I was in charge of coordinator of horticulture and director of grounds. So I oversaw that aspect. We're at Swarthmore College, which is a private undergraduate liberal arts college, founded in 1864 by the Society of Friends, the Quakers.
Nice.
And we're relatively small. We have a little over 400 acres of property. About 200 acres of that is developed as part of campus. The other 200 acres is just on the west side of campus, and it is the Crum Creek Valley. And so it's 200 acres of woodland with a creek running through it. And that's part of campus. It has several miles of trails within it and
Nice.
everything. But the other 200 acres is all of our area around academic buildings, all of our administrative buildings, athletic fields, and it's all the Scott Arboretum. So we don't have a separate arboretum that is separate and distinct from the campus, but the entire college campus is the arboretum.
Wow.
So, we have all of our woody plants are accessioned, computer mapped, all of that kind of thing. And so we have quite an extensive collection. And my role as executive director is to oversee all the operations that are as part of that. So we have an associate director of grounds operations that takes care of all of our turf, our athletic fields, all of our paving areas, our stormwater management structures and programs, all of our faculty housing properties, and snow removal, ice removal, all of that kind of thing, and all of our tree care. We also have another group that is our horticulture division. And so that is all of our gardeners and their various supervisors. So to care for everything that is, the Crum Woods, as well as all of our plant collections and our garden areas on campus. So we aren't just an arboretum with a collection of trees. We changed our name a little while ago to Scott Arboretum and Gardens, because really what we're known for are collections of plants within our garden spaces. So we have some very intensive gardens, like our rose garden, which was started in 1957. We have a pollinators garden. We have several courtyard gardens that have different landscape features associated with them. We have a newly reestablished winter garden, so a number of those garden spaces. And we still have our plant collections. So collections such as our collection of cherry trees, our lilac collection, viburnum collection, our famous magnolia collection and holly collections. There are a couple of our oldest ones, a large pinetum area. So all of those are all around campus and completely encompassing campus. And then our third group within our structure of Scott Arboretum and Gardens is our whole group that deals with learning and community engagement. So we have a volunteers program. So we have over 200 volunteers that help us either with gardening or in our horticultural library or our events. We have a big education program. Swarthmore College is undergraduate liberal arts college, but horticulture is not taught here. So it's a kind of an ironic thing. And I'll tell you about kind of our mission and background and why that is in a minute. But we have educational programs. We co-host a big perennials conference, which is coming up in October, and we'll get around 500 people here for that. Woody Plant Conference in the summer. We have lectures, workshops, day-long trips, multi-day trips, lots of other kinds of learning and engagement types of things that we do. And then we also have kind of community and family programming. So we have different things happening here on campus as part of the Arboretum, really to teach people about nature and the outdoors and plants, trying to start at a really young age to do that. And then we have a person totally devoted to campus engagement. So this would be things that would involve mainly students, but also would involve faculty and staff too, in somehow learning about the Arboretum or our naturals areas or plants or nature in their daily lives. So that's kind of my role, is to oversee all of those various aspects of what makes up Scott Arboretum and Gardens. So sorry, long answer to a short question.
No,
that sounds
was
like you
great.
have your hands full.
Yeah. Altogether, on our staff, we have 28 people. to do all
Okay.
those various things. Everyone from a mechanic, the folks who take care of our athletic fields, our gardeners, and all of those people working in education, community engagement, our fundraising aspect, publicity, communications, all of that kind of thing, our volunteer program. So all 28 of us doing that kind of thing.
And you had mentioned earlier that these different departments used to be separate and that they've made the decision to unify them into
Right.
sort of one large department.
Yeah.
And it seems like there are other public gardens in the area that are kind of taking um, that strategy. I know that Morris recently changed their name from Morris Arboretum to Morris Arboretum and Gardens, and I
Yeah.
kind of wonder if that had
Yeah.
something to do with it. But I wonder
Uh,
from your perspective, what's behind that kind of desire to
yeah.
unify everything?
Yeah. Well, let me talk about the name first. Um, I think at one point we were called the Scott Foundation up until the 1980s. And that's what the original donors that started the Scott Arboretum had set it up as a Scott Foundation. And we would constantly get letters from groups wanting us to give them money because they think of a foundation, that's what foundations do, but
Right,
that's
right.
not what it was at all. So at some point it's changed to the Scott Arboretum because that was kind of the lingo at the time for places that had plant collections. And then over time we moved more to not just a plant collection, not just having a lilac collection over there and the viburnum collection over there and the tree peony collection over there, but to move to where we were integrating all of those collections into design spaces. Um, and so uh, that became kind of the idea of, well, we're more about gardens. And a lot of our public now, they don't know what an arboretum is. Okay,
Mm.
so it's kind of almost an antiquated word for a lot of folks, and they don't understand what an arboretum is, but they understand what we mean by gardens. So Scott
Right.
Arboretum and Gardens. And so I think that's why a number of other institutions are also adding that and gardens onto their name.
I know
Um,
the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden has definitely taken that approach. They're not going to have the lilacs here and the
right.
viburnums here and
Yeah.
whatever. They're going to be incorporated into garden spaces throughout the
Yeah.
property.
Yeah. So the college started in 1864, as I said, but the Arboretum did not start at that time. So as I said, it's an undergraduate liberal arts college. In 1929, two graduates of Swarthmore College who graduated in the 1890s, Mr. and Mrs. Scott, hence we get the Scott Arboretum, set up the endowment which started the Scott Arboretum in 1929. And the mission of the Scott Arboretum, as they outlined it, and this is kind of me distilling it down into kind of today's lingo, was to grow and display the best plants that did well here in the Delaware Valley area to inspire home gardeners. So it wasn't about a botanical collection for the biology department. It wasn't a repository for botanical study or anything like that. It really was a collection of plants to inspire home gardeners. So at that point, people could come out and they could look on campus, and we're open every day of the year from sun up to sundown. No admission fee, no gates, no fencing. Just come on campus whenever you want to during daylight hours, and you can walk around campus. You can take a look at our plant collections, all of that. But when they originally set it up, it was these different groups of plants kind of planted in different areas around campus. So if someone wanted to see really nice magnolias, they could come out, in March and April and kind of see, and it's like, oh, I really like that one better than that one. Oh, yeah, let me get that one called Pinky. I really like that one as compared to some of the other ones. Well, that was good for picking a plant, but that's kind of as far as it would go. And then the Arboretum decided we really need to teach people more about how to use these plants in their garden also. So then it was the idea of, okay, let's combine some of the best plants we have into more garden spaces. And so kind of spaces in between campus buildings became more intimate garden spaces. Because in reality, there aren't that many suburban gardeners that have 200 acres to landscape. But they might have this small space that it like existed between gardens or gardens that or buildings that would kind of form a kind of a courtyard space that could be designed. It's like, oh, I could translate that into my front garden, or that look, I could do that off of my patio and do something like that. So around the 1980s, it started being more of, oh, let's take those courtyards and let's incorporate many different plants in there. So they're really more designed garden spaces representing all different types of conditions and structures around them and different sizes and spaces and everything. So that's kind of how all of that happened from the very beginning to what we are today.
It's interesting. Before we started recording, we were talking about how you used to be an extension agent for Penn
Yeah,
State,
yeah,
like us, and that you when you started, it was around the time that the Master Gardener program was
mhm.
starting up, and there was kind of a shift. This was before I was born, but a shift from what I understand, a little
Darn
bit
kids.
towards I know towards consumer horticulture, and so recognizing, okay, people have properties, they have questions, they're getting
Yeah,
interested in gardens, so
yeah,
and the horticulture agent can't spend all day answering questions from the public, so we
right.
need to train these volunteers to do this.
Yeah,
And it's interesting, like around the 80s when the Scott Arboretum also kind of had that awareness that, okay, like the average person is not going to have like a magnolia grove.
hmm hmm
They're going to have like
A
one
magnolia
magnolia,
tree.
One magnolia.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and all these other things in a smaller
yeah,
space. So I think that's a
yeah,
cool example of kind of how the use of the grounds kind of shifted
yeah.
in relation to what the public needed.
Yeah. So yeah, so I was an undergraduate at Penn State in horticulture from 1978 to 82. And that was like a big peak for
Hmm.
enrollment in horticulture departments all around the country. It was kind of like the Green Revolution time. And, at that point, like people were rediscovering houseplants and tractor trailer loads of foliage plants would come up from Florida to various places. And, you couldn't go to a new restaurant or cocktail lounge and there weren't ferns hanging from the ceiling. So it was like a really big time for people kind of discovering plants, whether they be indoor house plants or outdoor gardening, that kind of thing, vegetable gardening, all of that stuff. So lots of people getting into horticulture. And then I graduated from Penn State, degree in horticulture. My emphasis was actually in plant breeding. So
Hmm.
I had a history of that, working in the hort department at Penn State and doing research on plant breeding. And then I went on to graduate school at North Carolina State, and I was breeding small fruit crops, mainly focusing
Okay.
on grapes, but I also worked on brambles and I also worked on peaches too. So doing that in graduate school. And it was a summer between my junior and senior year. No, yeah, actually, between my junior and senior year at Penn State, I did an internship with Penn State Cooperative Extension, and I was doing horticultural work in Lebanon County,
Okay.
Pennsylvania. So I was there for the whole summer. And I was doing basically a lot of home horticulture stuff, but I would go out with the one of the other agents if they would do commercial calls and all of that kind of thing. I was in graduate school and I was finishing up, and I was actually planning on going on for a PhD at that time. But my car died and I had no money. And one of the extension educators from Penn State called me up at North Carolina and said, "We know you're going to be graduating soon, and we have this position that is open. We're just seeing if you might be interested." But as I said, my car died and I had no money. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'll take that job. And I figured I would do that for just a bit and go on for a PhD. Um, but it ended up being the role of essentially a multi-county horticultural agent working with commercial growers here in southeastern Pennsylvania. And I was headquartered in Delaware County. And at that time, horticultural agents in each of the counties around here, we kind of had our specialties. So I became the specialist for small fruit production. Also, I worked with greenhouse growers and I worked with the arborist industry. So those were kind of the three big things I was working with. And then a fellow agent was working on turf, and another one was working on tree fruits, and another one was working on mushrooms, and another one was working with nursery producers. So we all kind of had our specialties that we would share back and forth and help to do programming for that. And it was
Mm,
while during that time, I got to know the folks at the Scott Arboretum. They had a job
Mm.
open. It's like, okay, I'll try that. And
mhm.
I've been here 35 years since then. So,
Wow.
yeah.
You
Um,
But
definitely
yeah,
found your
but yeah,
place.
yeah, the big changes, yeah, in the industry, during that time and kind of the emphasis of what people were doing. So it's
Mm.
interesting to kind of see how things have changed over that time. Yeah.
And it's interesting that you remember like the beginning of the Master Gardener program here in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
because it has really grown into a
Oh, yeah.
huge,
Yeah.
huge, very successful program.
Yeah, so when I started in Delaware County, I mean, I was doing that regional work, but then, I was still the horticulture agent for Delaware County. And we would have, so many calls during the growing season that actually we had enough of money that we would hire a part-time person who would
Hmm.
come in. I think at that point it was like 3 days a week. So anyone who had calls, it's like, okay, call back on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday between, 9 and 3 in the afternoon, and you'll be able to talk to someone because I couldn't sit at the
No,
desk all the time
no.
and I couldn't answer all of those calls. Um, and so we had the person doing that, and yeah, then just towards that time in the kind of the mid to late 80s, there started being some programs of this master gardening program, and I know it was happening in some other state. I can't remember exactly where.
I
And
want to say
then
it
we kind of got
didn't it
it
like
started.
start in Washington State or
yeah,
Oregon?
I think
Well, I really
Washington.
don't
Okay.
remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. David Gibby is the educator
Okay.
who
Yeah.
started it.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the same time, we were working with urban gardening.
Okay.
So the Philadelphia group of Cooperative Extension was way into urban gardening, and I was able to get a really large grant that we were starting an urban gardening program in the city of Chester, which is in Delaware County. And so we were able to hire two people to kind of run that program, the urban gardening program in Chester also. So all those things were like, really, really coming on at that time. Master gardening program, urban gardening initiatives and programs, as well as this big emphasis on commercial horticulture.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to ask, well, I have a lot of questions about
Mhm.
how the Arboretum functions and how it has changed in terms of visitors and
Mhm.
responding to what visitors like. But I do want to start out by just asking about the plants. And
Yeah.
obviously, there's lots and lots of species represented there on all those acres. And um, I guess I wonder just to like narrow it down a little bit if there is a particular plant collection that has sort of stood the test of time as being either really popular or really resilient.
Mhm.
You had mentioned roses, and roses are getting harder to grow for a
Mhm.
number of reasons, as are a lot of plants actually
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
probably used to be sort of the mainstays of public gardens and arboreta. But I wonder, is there in your time at Scott, is there a plant collection that has kind of just continued to thrive through that time and sort of maintain its shine and its
Yeah.
draw?
Um, yeah, I would say there's a couple. We have a really noted collection of magnolias. We've had magnolia collection for a long, long time. Um, and when you say something like that, it can be really, really diverse, you kind of a collection. So, and it's just interesting over time, some of the things we were starting with. So, Magnolia virginiana, one of our native magnolias. It's really not native to this area, but just not far south from here it is. So you'll find it in Delaware, you'll find it in southern New Jersey, likes really, really moist conditions and everything. And we had a cultivar here probably since the 1940s called Magnolia virginiana variety australis
Mhm.
cultivar Henry Hicks. And actually, that was named here at the Scott Arboretum, and it was named from Henry Hicks from the Hicks Nursery on Long Island, an old nursery that was there, been around for generations. Um, and that was a selection because it was hardier and it would hold on to the
Mhm.
majority of its leaves through the winter. Where if you could possibly grow Magnolia virginiana in this area before, but they would be deciduous. They would just drop all of their leaves. So that was, like the one. And since then, there are a number of other cultivars, and I think now you can grow Magnolia virginiana quite a bit farther north
Mhm.
and west than what it was previously. So some things about how the climate has changed during that time. We didn't used to be able to grow Lagerstromia, crepe myrtles.
Okay.
We had maybe one or two on campus. Um, if we had one, we could never think of planting it in the fall. If we had planted in the spring, we would know probably for the first 3 years it would die back to the ground.
Mhm.
And these were some of the hardiest ones we were trying to grow. And then if we got it past year 3, then it might have wood that would be mature, root system that's mature enough to withstand having some up above ground stems that would last through the winter. Now we can pretty much grow any of them.
Hmm.
That
They're
that
still, they can still be dieback shrubs for
yeah.
us out here in the hinterlands.
Yeah. For us, they don't die back at all, and so we
No.
can pretty much grow any. But so a magnolia collection is really important. We have a really extensive collection of hollies, both deciduous and evergreen hollies in all different species. We have a really old pinetum collection. Probably one of our most unique collections. One of the things we're really known for is our tree peony collection. And we do know that some of those original plants we have in a collection date from around 1930, 1931. We have correspondence from Dr. Wister, who was our first director and our director for many, many years, about those plants. And so we know that we have that. And we have a very good collection of Saunders hybrids. Dr. A.P. Saunders, who was I think he was a chemistry professor at Hamilton College in upstate New York, and he bred peonies, tree peonies. He also bred herbaceous too, but we have a really nice collection of his Sonder tree peonies, and they are kind of going through this big revival right now. So since then, I've started co-founded the Mid-Atlantic Peony Society. We have a big Peony Palooza every year in May. We're actually hosting the American Peony Society to this area next May, first weekend of May, here in Delaware and Chester counties. And so that's kind of a unique plant collection that we have. But we have a plant that's probably kind of out of favor and fashion, the lilacs, as I mentioned, but also viburnums and a huge number of different things, other things that we had. Once perennials started getting really popular, and that was in the 1980s. Actually, it's when I was in Extension. The first perennials conference was held during that time. So this perennials conference that I said is coming up in October that we host here at the Scott Arboretum has always been here. It involves, at one point, Cooperative Extension was a co-sponsor of it in the very beginning years. Now it is run and managed by the Scott Arboretum, Longwood Gardens, Chanticleer, Hardy Plant Society, Mid-Atlantic Chapter, and the Pennsylvania Hort Society. So those are the groups that kind of organize and run that, and we will get 500 people in person and maybe 100 people virtual for that one-day conference in October. But at that point, perennials were just getting started. So it was, Sedum Autumn Joy, and, what were a couple of the other ones? Pennisetum, Aleopicoroides,
Yeah.
Hamelin.
Goldsturm Rudbeckia.
Goldsturm Rudbeckia. Those were like the three biggies. So it's come a long way since then. So that was, a really popular thing at the very beginning. But now, you mentioned about the Rose Garden. So we've had the Rose Garden since 1957. And it was to honor one of the dean of students for the college, and it was right in the middle of college. And it was a relatively formal rose garden, not that it was rectilinear, but formal beds of roses where there would be solid blocks of each different cultivar of rose. So it's mainly made up of the hybrid teas, the floribundas, the grandifloras, had some post and chain around the outside for the climbers and ramblers. And then there was one other bed that had some of the species and shrub roses in it. All of the roses were planted about 2 feet apart from each other, solid cultivar. So you'd have a solid bed of, 30 Mr. Lincoln roses, which were gorgeous when they would flower, in late May, early June. And then within a couple of weeks, they would have no leaves left on them from black spot and all of that kind of thing. And at that point, the roses were sprayed every 10 days to 2 weeks, fungicide insecticide, and that's what the program was.
Right.
Well, even when I started here in 1990, early on, we started experimenting with, well, what other things could we use? We had a big, and this was through Cooperative Extension, we had a big research project. This was along with Dave Shoshanik, who actually followed in my footsteps in Delaware County, and Rick Johnson
I
at
remember.
our IPM research program. And we were working with Greg Hoover, who was professor in entomology at Penn State. And we did a lot of research on growing degree days, plant phenology, all of that kind of thing was some of the big work that we had done. And we had, 12 to 20 different institutions, depending on the year, collecting data to add into that program. But at that point with the roses, we were trying things such as baking soda, so all these different things to try to control some of the diseases like black spot and anthracnose and all of that kind of stuff. And then we started using some beneficial insects, and all with limited success, I would say, for roses. And then it was probably a little more, 10 years ago, probably at least, maybe a little more, maybe 12 years ago, I finally said, okay, this has got to change. This is an endowed garden on campus, it's meant to be a rose garden. What can we do to make it more applicable to now, here and now? Okay. We still need to have roses in it. So we started looking to see where could we get the best, most disease-resistant roses that we had. So you all probably remember knockout rose, which is pretty disease resistant. So everything we were finding at that point were shrub roses, okay?
Right.
And we didn't want a full garden just full of knockout roses. There's knockout and not much more at that point. So we started finding other breeders, rose breeders, who were doing work with roses to really look for disease resistance, especially is what they were working for, disease resistance. We kind of figured out different ways of managing the insect part. If we spread the roses apart, gave more air movement between them, that if we planted other companion plants, other flowering plants to attract beneficial insects in, we actually have very few insect problems in our rose garden. Yeah, if it's a bad year for Japanese beetle, they'll get that. They're here for a couple of weeks, then they're gone. We just kind of accept that's what it is. But diseases were still a problem. So we've actually, what we decided was we're not going to have those solid beds of roses anymore. We're going to give each of the roses more space. We'll still have blocks of cultivars, but a lot space in between them where we have all kinds of other plants, everything from lavender and clematis and salvias and alliums and all kinds of other things growing in between them. So that really has interest all through the gardening year, not just, that time in May and June when roses flower, and then maybe some repeat flowering in the fall, but it's all through the year. And then also realizing we're not going to keep those same cultivars of roses all the time. Just because Mr. Lincoln's been there from 1957, sorry, Mr. Lincoln, you get every kind of disease. We're not going to spray you. So it is actually a group in Germany that is doing a lot of the research, and there are a number of other ones now. They aren't the only ones, but they have been very prolific in what they've been introducing for disease-resistant roses. And those are available in the US now. So we participated in a number of years with the American Rose Trial for Sustainability, ARTS program. And we have a whole separate nursery area, and we would do blind trials of roses to see how they did in this area. And then we'd feed that information back, and then that would go into a trial, then that information would get published to the public. So we have a good set of roses now. As we get newer and better things, then that's, 5 years ago, there's a fabulous rose we were growing, Julia Child, beautiful color, nice, more of a short floribunda. Sorry, Julia, you're just not cutting it anymore. You get black spot more easily than some of these other ones. So I don't think we're going to have Julia Child in our rose garden a whole lot longer. But we have many other ones that are doing really well. So that's one of the ways it's like just that one garden space, how it's changed. And we actually, in that rose garden, we were saying that it actually, since we did that change, it was organic. So we weren't doing any spray. It was all totally organic. Starting last year, we had to modifying that, saying it is now sustainable because we're having a problem with rose rosette disease.
I was
Mhm.
just going to ask
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
rose rosette.
We have rose rosette disease, and we're trying to break the cycle of the areophyid mite. So we are using a miticide, but that is the only chemical that we are using in the rose garden. Everything else about it is organic. So we're not organic. We're saying it's sustainable now because we're using that miticide.
How are you scouting for those mites?
Every week, we have some volunteers that we've trained,
Mhm.
actually looking for the rose rosette. It's
Okay.
almost impossible to scout for the
Because
mite
they're tiny,
themselves.
they're
Yeah,
minuscule. Yeah.
yeah, they're very tiny, and they want to be in those
They're
buds.
like in the buds. Yeah.
So yeah, so you really can't see them. So we look for the symptoms, trying to eliminate the symptoms, as soon as we find them. So basically, looking at every plant, all of that time like that, and if we see something that we suspect, we rogue it out. So
Mhm.
we've lost lots of plants over the past, 6, 8 years because of rose rosette. Hopefully, at some point, we'll have better choices of roses that are more resistant to
Yep.
rose rosette disease. And I think, Texas A&M especially is working on that in some other places.
Yeah,
So I think
University
we'll
of
have that.
Tennessee was pretty
Yeah.
involved. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's one garden space and how it's changed over the years.
yeah, I mean, that is such a fascinating example because I kind of misspoke a little bit earlier when I said it's gotten harder to grow roses. And I
Mhm.
think I was thinking rose rosette disease because we hear about
Yeah.
that a lot.
Yeah.
But in this case, in a lot of landscapes, um, we do have really species that have been really important parts of landscapes for a long time in our region that are starting to suffer from various kind of climate stressors and
Yeah.
drought and just the changing growing season.
Yeah.
In this case, though, it's kind of like our tolerance for doing weekly fungicide
Yeah.
applications has also changed,
Yeah.
and I think that's true among the public, and I'm
Oh,
sure,
yeah.
the college students, if you ask
Hmm.
them, and
Hmm.
and so
Yeah.
it's such an interesting strategy that kind of aligns with the greater theme of sort of diversifying, like rather than having, it used to be very fashionable to have a lot of the same plant in one area and
Hmm.
look how
Hmm.
beautiful this looks, and it's very uniform, and it just seems like the theme is adding in more diversity,
Mm.
Yeah.
and within that kind of creates a more resilient, maybe disease pest resistant
Yeah.
collection of plants. And so you haven't had to completely get rid of the rose garden, and I'm not sure you're able to because of the endowment, but
It's an endowment.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting example of kind of the spirit of this garden is still the same, and we're
Yes.
still,
Mhm.
enjoying this plant, and allowing visitors to experience it, but it's just in a slightly different configuration,
Yeah.
so that we don't have to be
Yeah.
constantly spraying, and yeah, so I think that's
Yeah.
a really cool
We have
example.
a one late afternoon evening in late May. We have our rose celebration. So we'll have food and drink and talks and tours about the rose garden, and we'll have a bunch of giveaways and have a couple of food trucks here. But we give everyone who comes who wants a rose plant that is
Oh,
one
wow.
of the newer disease-resistant roses. So it's like, yes, you can grow this in the garden and you don't have to spray it for diseases. So it's one of
Nice.
our way of trying to get some of these better plants out to people. And you were mentioning about how the students' appreciation of things. We have several acres of organic lawns on campus, and it's the main lawns that students are using. Okay,
Hmm.
so where they play frisbee, where they want to lay out in the sun with a book on a nice sunny day, and that kind of thing. Where they just want to gather with their friends and chat, that kind of stuff. And we have a new dining center and community commons, and all around that building are meadows. So now in
Nice.
their third and fourth year, around some of them, and they are looking really spectacular right now. I mean, even with the dry weather, yeah, some of the
Mm.
things came and went a little faster, but and it's on a slope too.
Oh,
But
wow.
a number of those plants, it's like, okay, they can handle that and they can still flower. The asters, or actually not asters, they're now symphyotrichums, are in flower now, and a number of other things. So that is like a real change in how campus looks
Hmm.
from 30 years ago.
And it's
Yeah.
interesting. My office just moved from a non-Penn State building to one of the Commonwealth campuses. That's the Greater Allegheny campus.
Mhm.
And the grounds managers there are kind of interested in they mow a lot.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
honestly don't know how many acres we have on campus,
Mhm.
but they mow a lot and they would
Mhm.
like to mow less.
Yeah.
So they're looking to us to help them maybe come up with some
Yeah.
meadows, which
Yeah.
would be wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, meadows are a whole different thing. And actually,
Absolutely.
it is something I really need to learn about more. And I keep encouraging my staff. It's like, okay, I need a couple of you to get really excited about meadows because I need to help with them. I kind of did that with green roofs.
Okay.
We have a number of green roofs on campus, and much of that came from my association with Dave Beatty and
Hmm.
Robert Gage from
Yep.
Penn
Yep.
State professors in the Hort department who are doing research on green roofs. And I was co-teaching a class here at the college in engineering, and I'm not an engineer at all, but it was on water management and stormwater. And that's something I had to be responsible for here on the campus. And so the class during that semester was really looking about stormwater management, and green roofs were just a really brand new thing at
Hmm.
that time. So I brought Dave Beatty down from Penn State. He gave a lecture to them. Then we started studying it more. And there was one row house in Philadelphia where the owner had put a green roof on. So we went and took a look at that and talked to the owner. And then we started talking to other people. Lo and behold, 2 years later, we put a green roof on a student residence hall, the first one in the United
Wow.
States, and that happened here. And now we have green roofs on many of our buildings. Yeah. So
Nice.
if the building
Nice.
doesn't have solar panels on it, it has green roofs on it. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Uh,
I did want to ask, and you had mentioned the perennial plant conference, and
Mhm.
I think the woody plant conference is
Woody
another
Plant
one that
Conference.
happens at Scott.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So the Perennial Plant Conference is Friday, October 17th this year. And you can go online, actually to any of those sponsoring organizations or just Google Perennial Plant Conference and you'll get to it. Registration's still open for that. And then the Woody Plant Conference typically is in mid-July, and that's a one-day event, and that's also on a Friday in mid-July. Yeah.
so and obviously
I
this is
had the
a
pleasure.
sorry, Sandy. You
Go ahead.
can I was going to say that obviously this is a long-standing collaboration between, you'd mentioned Chanticleer, Longwood, Hardy Plant Society, and PHS.
Yeah.
And I just kind of wonder, because here in Southeast PA, we are totally spoiled by the number of horticultural
Yeah.
offerings.
Yep. Yep.
And I just wonder, like what do you gain from a collaboration like that?
Oh my gosh.
Obviously, I
Yeah.
mean, I assume that it helps in all sorts of ways,
All
but
sorts of
can you kind
ways.
of
Yeah.
talk about what that is
Yeah.
like to be part of that?
Well, it's just great to have such a division of labor because there are a lot of things to do. I mean, if you think about, okay, who are we going to have for speakers? Okay, the more
Hmm.
people that are represented in a meeting room, then the more ideas you have for speakers. Then you have to contact the speaker and you have to kind of figure out what they're going to talk about and then do the write-up. So someone has to do the brochure, which they do at PHS. Someone has
Hmm.
to do the publicity, which Chanticleer handles much of that. Someone has to take care of the registration. Longwood takes care of that. Here at the Scott Arboretum, we have the facilities. We host it. We have it at that time of year in October because that's fall break. And so all the students are on break that week. Therefore, we can use, the big facilities of the auditorium and all of that. So just having that kind of synergy with all of those different groups represented, and it's a great way to talk to the neighbors too.
Hmm.
Sometimes you can get so isolated, even though we have a bunch of horticultural institutions around the area. If you're all doing your own thing, you're not talking to each other. But I think here in southeastern Pennsylvania, we really have a close horticultural community. I mean, we have a couple of other programs too. A Gardens Collaborative, the Greater Philadelphia Gardens Group, so where everyone's kind of trying to cooperate, and even the statewide organization of Pennsylvania of Public Gardens has a group for promotion of gardens, public gardens, and what they mean for the residents of Pennsylvania and visitors. Um, So there are all those types of collaborative things that are going on. So really you can get some really good energy about all of that. Then the Philadelphia Flower Show, most of
Right.
us in the public garden world, we volunteer for a day or more helping to put on that big show. And PHS couldn't do it all themselves
Right.
just for that thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that it helps to be able to, when you're experiencing some sort of challenge to horticulturally, or the way that uh the organization's being run, or things are changing, which is kind of a
Yeah.
theme throughout this whole
Yeah.
conversation. And
And
I'm
we have great bigger groups too. I've been a member of the Perennial Plant Association for a
Mhm.
long time. They have a great
yeah,
yearly meeting and regional meetings now that are very good. American Public Gardens Association,
Mhm.
which is kind of the professional organization for public gardens. They have regional meetings, and actually, I think there's going to be one out in Pittsburgh soon. And there are other organizations. So I always tell people, if you're really passionate in plants, join a plant society. You'll meet a bunch of weird people. But as I said about the Mid-Atlantic Peony Society, so I'm active in that, and we have a program coming up at the end of October for we call it our Dig and Divide, where we teach people about fall is the time for digging your peonies and dividing them, and we show them how to do that. And so we'll show them for herbaceous peonies and the intersectional hybrids, the Ito peonies as
Mhm.
tree peonies. The other night we had oversubscribed for tree peony grafting, because that's how tree peonies are propagated. So we're teaching people how to graft tree peonies. And it's a really, really weird grafting thing. So because you're taking just a 1 or 2 bud piece of your scion and grafting it onto an herbaceous rootstock.
Hmm.
So it's the weirdest looking
Yeah,
thing when you're
that would
finished. But
be
then you
odd.
keep it buried under the soil for a year and it'll sprout next spring and you'll have a new tree peony that's using
Wow.
that herbaceous peony as a rootstock.
Grafting
And
always
also
blows
I'm
my
involved in
mind.
the International Clematis Society, so very involved in that group. But I really enjoy the plant society things.
Yeah, that seems like a great way to get information and share valuable, you know, insights and
Mhm.
experiences.
Mhm.
And you
Yep.
just meet a bunch of other plant geeks. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we like.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for the conversation today. It's
Oh,
been
it's been fun.
I
Yeah.
think that we could probably keep you here for a whole nother hour to ask you more questions. But it's just great to speak to someone who's obviously, really enthusiastic about this work. And so we always wrap up our conversations by asking our guests what they like to do when they're not working. So what do you find yourself doing when you're not at the Arboretum?
Um, I'm really interested in art, architecture, and food. So I like to travel a bit. So usually every year I'll do a nice trip somewhere. Um, and much of my time really that I spend during decent weather months, so basically from March through early November, I have property with some cabins on it up in the Poconos. And they are
Ooh.
90-year-old buildings, and I'm trying to rescue them from collapsing on themselves. And so we're learning how to do everything ourselves. So I learned to be an electrician. So I've
Ah.
rewired 2 of the cabins so far, and
Whoa.
I can do the masonry work. We do the carpentry work, putting in windows and all of that kind of thing. So, and it's on a beautiful mountain stream, in a very beautiful north slope that is a threatened woods because there are hemlocks on it, which are not
Oh,
doing well, and that's what
Mm.
shades the mountain stream. So that's
right.
quite sad. We do have some beaches there, but we're north slopes, so not too many, but our beaches do have the beach leaf disease.
Mm-hmm.
That's something we're really worried about here at the Arboretum too. In our
Yeah.
woodland, we have some big stands of beech trees.
Are
Yeah.
you doing some planting to try to, some of the alternatives to hemlocks, or even some of the hybrids with Tsuga chinensis? You doing
Um,
anything like that?
at the mountain property, no. I mean, it's 50 acres, so it'd be a
Okay.
lot to try to take on to do that. And also a north slope, very rocky. It's a plant is growing there because somehow it found a bit of soil in between the rocks.
Okay.
And so if you just think of going out and planting, we still
That's
have a
gonna be
great
hard.
understory of rhododendron maximum.
Nice.
But those are such thickets, you could never plant into it,
Anything there,
to
yeah.
grow. So it's like we're just kind of waiting to see what happens. So there's a good stand of, and I think what will probably take over are yellow birch and black birch.
Okay.
Kind of take over because we have a lot of those around, and that seems to be like the first successional thing that will come in, even before red maple will come in.
Okay.
So I think that's what it'll be for a while, and then who knows what will be the next thing. Yeah. But
Wow.
so that's what I do. That's what I do. And fly fishing when I get a chance to do that.
Wow.
That was one of
all
Greg
sounds
That's
really
what I
Hoover's
miss.
passions.
That's what I grew up in Bellefonte, so that's what I kind of miss from that area, being able to go out and do some fly fishing close by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That all sounds really dreamy. Well, I hope you get.
I wish I had more time to do all that.
Right.
Yeah, of course. I'm
Sounds
sure
nice to talk about.
Well, hopefully this fall you'll get some good time outside and some good cabin time as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, again, we appreciate your time and coming to share about the work that you do, and hopefully we'll be able to follow up with you and hear how those yellow birches and all those
Yeah.
trees
I'll
are
be glad to
doing.
come back on sometime. Let me know. It's
All
fun.
right.
Yep.
Okay, thanks so much, Jeff.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Come and
Take
visit the
care.
Scott Arboretum.
We definitely will.
Yep.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Thanks.